The breaking news has just come via a statement from Finance Minister, Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland, that she, in fact, is no longer going to be Finance Minister and indeed is resigning from the cabinet. I'm going to bring in Janice McGregor here, but Janice, I'm going to take some time to read this, and we're going to put it up on the screen. We've been talking for a number of days, you and I, in terms of the tensions, the reports of tensions between Minister Freeland's office and the PMO, and this has come to pass. So a note addressed to the Prime Minister from Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland. We'll bring it up so you can read it along, but I'm going to read it through, talking about, firstly, the honor of her life to serve in government. We have accomplished a lot together, and here's where it begins. On Friday, you told me you no longer want me to serve as your Finance Minister and offered me another position in the Cabinet. Upon reflection, I have concluded that the only honest and viable path is for me to resign from the Cabinet. To be effective, a minister must speak on behalf of the Prime Minister and with his full confidence. In making your decision, you made it clear that I no longer credibly enjoy that confidence and possess the authority that comes with it. For the past number of weeks, you and I have found ourselves at odds about the best path forward for Canada. Our country today faces a grave challenge. The incoming administration in the United States is pursuing a policy of aggressive economic nationalism, including a threat of 25% tariffs. We need to take that threat extremely seriously. That means keeping our fiscal powder dry today so we have the reserves we may need for a coming tariff war. That means eschewing costly political gimmicks, which we can ill afford and which make Canadians doubt that we recognize the gravity of the moment. That means pushing back against America First economic nationalism with a determined effort to fight for capital and investment and the jobs they bring. So the statement continues, and I'm just taking the time to read it in its entirety because it really speaks to what has been going on, as she indicates, for the past number of weeks. It continues. That means working in good faith and humility with the premiers of the provinces and territories of our great and diverse country and building a true Team Canada response. I know Canadians would recognize and respect such an approach. They know when we are working for them, and they equally know when we are focused on ourselves. Inevitably, our time in government will come to an end, but how we deal with the threat our country currently faces will define us for a generation and perhaps longer. Canada will win if we are smart, strong, and united. It is this conviction which has driven my strenuous efforts this fall to manage our spending in ways that will give us the flexibility we will need to meet the serious challenges presented by the United States. And she indicates that she will continue to serve as Liberal Member of Parliament. Janice McGregor, I took that time because there is much in that statement. Chrystia Freeland resigning from cabinet after Prime Minister Trudeau offered her another position in cabinet, moving her out of finance. What do you make of that?
There's a lot to unpack in the way that she has laid out her rationale and her reasons here. I think this statement also gives us some insight into some things that were emerging, whether you want to call them anonymous media reports or rumors in this town, but it does kind of bring to daylight, if you will, some things that have been swirling for some time. The immediate question on everyone's minds has to be, who's going to deliver the fall economic update? We spoke earlier this morning about whether it would be a swan song for Chrystia Freeland. Now, I'm not sure we know who is going to be rising in the House of Commons at 4 o'clock this afternoon. We were not expecting a cabinet shuffle today, but is this something that you just have someone who's acting as finance minister read in the House of Commons? So I'm just laying out the biggest question on my mind first. How are they going to get through the day, let alone sort of getting through the week and onwards into the bigger challenges that this letter of hers lays out? There is some important phrasing, I think, in here, not only in terms of the conflict between her department and her as minister and the Prime Minister's office. This has been the subject of some media reporting in recent days. There is always tension between a finance minister and a Prime Minister over getting the balance right. This is hardly the first government that has seen this kind of tension over the desire to spend to reach sort of, if you will, political objectives versus the need to manage an economy. But for her to frankly now, after sort of for a long time, sticking to talking points about this being healthy and them working together well and an honor to serve and so on, for her to bring that to light and let everyone know, yes, they did have a big disagreement about some of the things happening this fall. I think that's very significant. I think it's significant also that this letter talks about the American relationship and the incoming Trump administration after there had been questions about why she was not part of that dinner at Mar-a-Lago. There had been questions about how the incoming Trump administration sees her, perceives her, whether something that had been her strength, her biggest success, if you will, in politics, getting the renegotiation of NAFTA, whether now there were questions about whether she could carry that Canada-U.S. file forward for a variety of reasons, whether it was that they didn't like her style in Washington or that there were fundamental differences in terms of how to approach this challenge going forward. And stunning, I think, also to sort of see her last week out making announcements related to the strategy of this economic statement, carrying on even as this letter reveals that she found out on Friday that she was not going to be finance minister, and presumably has had the weekend to ruminate and write this document. I think that is extraordinary. The final paragraph I'd point you to is one that is quite sharply written about how they know their time in government will end. That is a very frank thing to say out loud. You might say that's just realistic. We all watch and read public opinion surveys and can see the way the winds are blowing. But to have someone who's serving as the deputy prime minister of a prime minister who has signaled he is going to run again and believes he can win again against Pierre Poilievre's Conservatives, to have his deputy prime minister put in writing and publicize a statement that says, we know our time in government is going to come to an end, that strikes me as extraordinary. And for everyone who was thinking that Justin Trudeau was heading into the holiday break on very shaky footing already, I would present to you that this letter just rattles him to his core.
Okay, I wanted to get your overall perspective, Janice, given that there is so much to talk about in this letter, this extraordinary letter announcing that Chrystia Freeland is resigning from her cabinet position, saying that she will continue to work with colleagues as a Liberal member of Parliament, and committed to running again for her seat in Toronto in the next federal election. Just to be clear, she's not walking away immediately. She's stepping away from cabinet. From cabinet. So a couple of things I want to ask you about that. I had highlighted that same line. Talking to Canadians would they know when we are working for them, and they equally know when we are focused on ourselves. Inevitably, our time in government will come to an end. So that acknowledgement, Janice, that some of the things which she also talks about, it's kind of tied in with what she says earlier in the letter, and this was what I wanted to ask you about as well. The discussion has been that there was the GST tax holiday, that amount of money, but of course then the additional sending out of these $250 rebate checks. This has been a point of contention because it put the coffers above the deficit threshold that she herself had set. So when she writes, we need to take the threat of the U.S. tariffs extremely seriously, that means keeping our fiscal powder dry so we have the reserves we may need for a coming tariff war. That means eschewing costly political gimmicks which we can ill afford. Do you think that's what she's referring to there? Because that was ostensibly the difference of opinion. That was for political purposes only, and she didn't think that it was financially responsible.
Yeah, and we saw sort of the results of this affordability package perhaps being prepared in haste. I don't think I'm going out on a limb to suggest that it was, based on what we've heard and seen. The fact that sort of it was pushed out there as a solution, perceived by some to not be fiscally responsible, but also that they didn't have a plan to pass the whole thing. Again, one of the storylines this afternoon that we were watching was this business of these $250 checks that they could not get through Parliament. They could only get through the tax holiday part of it. That is not the sign of something that was thoroughly consulted and thought through and planned, that is the sign of something that was pushed out because they felt they needed to do something, to please people, to sort of turn the page on some troubles, to change the channel. But if you are focused on trying to keep a fall economic statement inside particular parameters, if you are focused on things that you can defend from an economic strategy point of view, something like a sort of spending a total of $6 billion sort of on very short-term kind of handouts to people before the holidays to kind of boost you politically. That's very difficult to sustain those two lines at once. But nevertheless, she went out there like a good political soldier and sold it for a long time. But now, sort of on the cusp of an economic statement, it has decided no. On the heels of being told on Friday that she wouldn't be finance minister. And again, I lean into this timing, Heather, because I find it extraordinary that he would tell her ahead of when she's scheduled to give the update that she isn't going to be finance minister anymore. If the government needs this update to be made in the Commons, wouldn't you let her read it and present it, and then maybe embark on that conversation the next morning?